Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I do hope it finds you well. My name is John, and welcome to my writing space. I am here bringing you another Storytime Thursday. Well, I'll be reading chapter 14 of my book, The Shadow of the Past. Et voila. So sit back, relax, grab a water, whatever your beverage of choice is, and I hope you enjoy. And before we get started, please like, share, subscribe, leave a comments, all of that good stuff. I'd love to hear what you think of this. What think of the content of the chapter and how the story is going so far and all that, as well as there'll be a link at the end of this whole playlist of me reading the story so far. Like, share, subscribe, all of that also helps me out on this channel. So here we go. Chapter 14, The Knights of Shadow. Urgar could not be sure exactly how far they had traveled or where, although he was fairly certain they had left the inn by some secret passage, as at no point was he led down any stairs until long after they got outside. Urgar became aware how difficult it was to judge the passage of time without the use of one's eyes, but if pressed he would have guessed that they had been walking for well more than an hour before he heard a faint creak of hinges and felt his feet on a wooden floor once more. He was led through another series of passages and down two flights of stairs before being set down firmly but not painfully into a high-backed wooden chair. A soft thud to his left indicated to him that Val'inar had been set down in a similar situation. After what seemed like an interminably long time, a hand whipped the hood from Urgar's head, which left him blinking for several minutes in the candlelight, which seemed blinding after the darkness of the sack. The first thing he did when his eyes began to adjusting was to look over at Val'inar, who also had a sack removed from his head. Judging by the faint lump that he could make out on the right side of Valinar's head, the elf had been knocked unconscious, or at least dazed, probably to remove the chance of him using the power he possessed. Although at no point had Urgar sensed Valinar even attempting to weave a spell. Did not seem to have taken as long for his eyes to adjust as he was staring unblinkingly straight ahead. As Urgar turned to look, he saw that they were in a room without windows and bare wooden walls with a collection of weapons, and as Urgar noticed, with mounting dread, instruments of torture as well. Around them were a dozen soldiers, all of them looked tall and lean and deadly, wearing leather jerkins, pants, boots, and gloves, and each wearing a tabard upon which was a silver spear slanted across a sable field. Their faces were all covered by hardened leather caps with black cloth draped in front of their faces. This sight filled Urgar with both relief and terror. Relief that it was not the Union who had captured them, but terror in that such a device was only borne by the elite Knights of Shadow, which, though supposedly a secret organization, were famous throughout Sirana as being one of the main reasons the kingdom of Camral had achieved such success in recent centuries. It was said that the Knights of Shadow knew of a lord's treachery before he even thought of it himself. At the center of the room was a large wooden desk upon which were neatly ordered piles of paper, an inkwell, and several tall candles. Behind the desk sat a thin man wearing billowing robes that looked to be of midnight blue. He had short graying hair and a full beard that was also graying. His fierce, inset, dark eyes were scanning over a piece of parchment which he held delicately in a long-fingered hand. Aside from his robes, he was also wearing black trousers, a heavy woolen shirt of crimson red, and a sash about his waist of the same color. He had a sheathed dagger and a simple leather case shoved through the sash. The man grunted, as if annoyed, after he finished reading the documents, which he put down carefully before turning toward his prisoners. His voice was mellow, but he spoke quickly. "So you're the elf that's caused the Union so much trouble, and you're the goblin he's said to travel with? You were foolish to come here, and even more foolish to make inquiries about the Union's strength and presence in so public a place as the Square of Scales." Valinar looked at their captor defiantly and stated, "If you knew who we were, why did you not have us arrested this afternoon?" This afternoon, chuckled the man. I knew you were coming long before today. If I'd wanted you dead or captured, you would never have made it to the city. How? Began Urgar. Rantros, the Union commander, then the city may be a fool, but I am not, came the man's reply. When word reached us of what had happened in Ramalda, he ordered his men and me to watch the north and west carefully. But I said to myself, what are Ramaldans most skilled at? And the answer came back ships. So I had a watch set on to the east and south. I'd have sent scouts out, but I knew they'd have been killed by the try. Oh, yes, I know of your alliance with them as well. And sure enough, the day before yesterday, my watchman saw you cresting the bridges to the east. Val'inar seemed puzzled by this. Then why did the guards of the gate not seek to stop us? Because I did not tell them to do so. In fact, I did not inform the Union at all of my discovery. Then you seek to wring information out of us? Inquired Val'inar, who had clearly not grasped the full meaning of what the man had just told him. You shall get no information from me, no matter how you torture me, and should you try, I shall bring this building down upon your head. The man laughed aloud at this. I did not bring you here in order to torture you. I brought you here to keep you out of the hands of the Union, who are not so stupid as they'd be blind to your blundering about forever. And I'd not advise bringing the roof down on my head. That will certainly hurt your cause. What is your game? Inquired Val'inar, who was clearly growing more puzzled, just as Urgar was growing even ever more reassured. The man chuckled. You are more naive than I feared you'd be. I'm not your enemy. I brought you here so that I could help you. As the dawning light of understanding came into Valinar's eyes and the last fear slipped from Urgar's mind, the man turned to his guards, commanding, Release their bonds and bring them some refreshment. We have much to talk about. Val'inar was well relieved at the news that the men who had bound him and led him to this dark hall were friends, yet he was still uneasy. He mistrusted so much secrecy in their hosts, while unfailingly polite, laughed rather too much for his taste, especially since the man's eyes did not laugh with the rest of his mouth. His dark eyes never left the elf and seemed to be trying to bore their way into him if they could. They were joyless eyes and hard. The man was certainly no mage. Val'inar would have felt it if he were. But nevertheless, this was the first human that he had ever met who might just be able to contend with him should he seek to peer into his mind. After the refreshment of dark, strong wine and some soft, warm bread had come, the man, who had been poring over a few more papers while they waited, stood to address them once more. I think perhaps the time has come for me to introduce myself. I am Sir Daemor of House Freylin, and as I think you at least, Urgar of the Graphic of Guest, I am the leader of the Knights of Shadow. I know already who you are, Val'inar of the Toranu Forest, and if the rumors are true, last of the Elves of Balance. It sounds as though the Union has told you much, observed Val'inar. They told me little that I did not already know, smiled Damus. You, Urgar, are an important figure among your people, so naturally we will correct whatever information we can about you. And you, Val'inar, are quite probably unique in this world. I'd hazard that we knew of your nature and your existence before even you did. How could you possibly know that? Inquired Val'inar, thoroughly shocked. We have but little contact with your people. Little but enough, came the man's cryptic reply, which he let sink in for a moment before enlightening his guests further. The Toranu elves are reclusive, this is true, but they still are courteous enough to receive our traders each year. And you've always been so very curious about the outside world, haven't you? Camral has lasted as long as it has for reasons other than swords and horsemen. These are important, but wars are more apt to be won by knowledge than brute power. Certain of our merchants are paid well and discreetly for knowledge which they might bring back from their dealings with others. Naturally, the sons of the Ha'afa are of interest to us, and so have an elf, and to have an elf so unnaturally curious about the outside world and so unlike his kin, we took note of that. You have been in the records on our people for 2 centuries now, but it was my uncle, the last commander of the Knights of Shadow, and a great lover of ancient stories who made the connection that you were a high-born elf. If I am so rare a specimen, I am surprised you did not seek me out. And why would we do that? Countered Damus. You did not seem interested in either harming the kingdom or aiding us. Besides, the memory of Camral is a long one. There are dusty tomes in our deep vaults that tell tales of your kin in the days of old. We know the power that is in your blood, and my uncle judged, as I did and do, that it was best to see what course of action you took, rather than risk provoking you towards one action or another. It was Urgar's turn to ask a question. If you know so much, Shadow Knight, why is it that you and your holds sway within your own lands, and not House Freylon? After all, it was the foundation of your order that has allowed Camral to enjoy the longest period of prosperity in its history these last 500 years. Well said, Goblin, chortled Damus in reply, and I like the title of Shadow Knight. But I should not have to tell you, I know your reputation. Knowledge is a dangerous tool. A single word in the right ear can topple a kingdom, but all the knowledge and facts in a world can fail utterly to get the simplest peasant to walk across the room. There's also no limit on who can play this game. um, this game, Knights in War, is a game that only the rich play, but that is a simple game. The game of words can be played by an illiterate peasant more deftly than the greatest of kings ever could. That is not an answer to the question, observed Val'inar. No, indeed, my good elf, replied Deimos immediately. It is not an answer. In short, I was outplayed by that sorceress Ushara. Elegantly outplayed. And my cousin has died because of it, I fear. The only reason we are sitting here having this conversation, and the only reason there is a chance to save Camral from her clutches, is that I was able to win a few points along the way. A few, I suspect, or rather hope, without her knowing about it. Your cousin? Inquired Val'inar. King Ertol, the third of his name, responded Daemons, for once looking somber. He was a good king, if something of a fool, but I loved him dearly and served him faithfully for many long years. I have succeeded in hiding his son away, and I shall do everything in my power to see that he is restored to the crown that is rightfully his. And I think that you two are perhaps the best opportunity I shall ever have to accomplish that goal. You have so much information at your fingertips. Why do you need our help? Surely you can find enough proof of the Union's treachery to turn the city against them, Urgar pointed out. Words and truth are not swords and might, admitted Damus. I have enough clout and enough evidence to raise the city against the Union, and my name carries enough weight to marshal our far-flung armies. But what good would that do? If the city rises without full and honest support for our cause, it will surrender again as soon as the Union army arrives here. And the Union will then pick off our armies as they slowly gather. If that happens, Camral will truly be lost. How can we help then? Inquired Val'inar. I need two things from you, responded Deimos. The first is that you can give me a cause. I can raise the city in outrage, but that outrage will cool once the army arrives at our gates. You can give them something to fight for and something to fight around. In truth, most of the peasants and town folks care little for who rules them as long as they are fed and protected, and many of the lords in the city care less for Camral than their own skin. If we can turn those lords to our cause and sow real hatred and distrust towards the Union among the populace, the city will fight to the bitter end for us. That sounds like delicate work, mused Val'inar. You spoke of a second reason? Indeed, I need the aid of the armies you are marshalling, admitted the human. Turning to Karin and her lords to our side will be difficult, but it is eminently doable. But that will aid us only little if the Union simply destroys the city. I can have our armies at the ready, but the Union has scattered our forces and disarmed them with some thoroughness. It'd take more than a week, and even that being optimistic, for even the nearest force to come to our aid. The Union has a large army, an army large enough to break even the Citadel in that time. I know the Romaldans are landing an army on our eastern shore, and I know you have the dwarves on your side as well as the Tri. With their help, we might be able to save the city. Val'inar nodded for a few moments in thought before responding. We can definitely help you both with both of those things. In fact, we had planned much the same ere we left Romalda. I do not wish to see this city burn or her people put to the slaughter any more than you do. But I fear that even if things go exactly as I hope, the city will still be forced to suffer siege for a few days at least. But after that, the Union will find its armies either caught in a deadly slaughter or will be forced to retreat hastily to the west and north so that it can regroup and face us. By then, with luck, some of Camral's armies will be upon the field, and we can at least match their numbers. Damus beamed a toothy grin. I see that the reports of your cleverness were not exaggerated. It is a good plan, and if the city is turned to your side, we shall endure whatever siege is necessary for victory. However, I must warn you of two things. The first is that it will be much more difficult to turn this city than it was to turn Romalda to your side. There are no foolish or unconscious lords here. The second is that I will follow whatever my people wish. I hate the Union and wish to drive them from here, but if we fail to turn these lords in your favor, then the city as well as I will support them. Val'inar sighed and nodded his understanding. More games of politics, it seems, then. Well, I look forward to the instructions. Val'inar moved to rise, but Damus motioned for him to sit down again. You cannot take any part of this. Your face and manner are too well known, and you have often shown yourself to be hasty and brash in your dealings with others. I can assure you that will not work here, and that you will be sold out to the Union before you make much headway at all. I grant you that I have no love of these games of politics, admitted Validar. What am I to do in the meantime? It was Urgar who answered his question. You have other tasks that you have been bound yourself to finish. If what Sir Damus has said is true, it will take some weeks to at least to accomplish our aim, and you would be confined the entire time if you stayed here, until perhaps the very end of when we need a figurehead to rally around. The Mad nodded in assent. That is an excellent suggestion. Here and now your skills would be wasted, but you can complete whatever this pilgrimage or whatever it is far quicker on your own than you could with a goblin slowing you down. No offense, Master Goblin, and regardless, your companion's skills would be of better use here. Is there not a danger of Urgar being caught as well? Val'inar pointed out. There's always a risk, responded Urgar, but for me it is much less a risk for you. Goblins are few here, but not uncommon. If I change clothes into something like a merchant's guard, I won't be recognized. You have no such chance. I could cloak myself in illusion, observed Val'inar. Damus chuckled. I've no doubt of that, but illusions take constant concentration, so how long could you keep that up? And are you so skilled that a human mage, of which the Union seems to have an ample supply, would not be able to see through it? Val'inar shook his head to indicate that he was not sure and sighed. I acknowledge my lack of skill and experience in politics. It would be better left to another. Are you sure you would not like to accompany me, Urgar? I will not deny that I could use the companionship on the long road north. Urgar smiled kindly at this. I am grateful that you so value my company, but Sir Damus is right. I would slow you down, and I am more use here. I am used to such politics and have played the game for much of my life and am passable at it. Sir Damus smiled. You sell yourself short. Despite your relative youth, you've been, or so I'm told, one of the dominant voices on the Uxor Council. Urgar bowed at this, which made Val'inar smile. Very well, then, I shall let you... Which made Val'inar smile. Very well, then, I shall let you two schemers get back to your plots. How soon may I be on your way? I have a fresh horse saddled at the north gate, and your sack provisioned and waiting for you as well, replied Demas. My men will lead you by a secret way to the north gate about an hour before dawn, which should be very shortly. You knew I would accept your terms, Val'inar observed with a smile, and I thank you for the use of a horse. A good host always knows how to best aid his guests, smiled Damus. Providing you with a horse serves me as well, for while it is best if you are gone from here for a few weeks, you will be needed back ere long, and it'd be best if you were not too long in returning. Val'inar rose and bowed to Sir Damus and then clasped hands with him. Damus then beckoned the knights forward to show Val'inar to his horse, as Val'inar made his farewell to Urgar. Two knights then led them through a wall which seemed to dissolve as they walked towards it, into a long and narrow passage. There were a few twists and turns. There once or twice that Valinar suspected that they were traveling through a cellar, but at last, however, they emerged just inside the city walls next to a small portcullis that was unguarded. Once his knightly escort unlocked the portcullis and raised it, he was motioned outside, and the knights disappeared down into the tunnels they had come through, which Valinar could not quite find, though he did not search too long or too hard. Outside the gate, Valinar found the first rays of dawn peering over the horizon to his right as he looked at the journey that lay ahead of him to the north. After Val'inar had surveyed the scene for a few moments, he turned his attention to the great charger, which was casually grazing a few feet from the portcullis, hollowed so as not to run off. Leaning against the city walls, Val'inar saw his pack, stuffed with provisions, his sword and armor, which he had taken off to sleep that night, and a thick cloak of brown wool with a large hood. The kind that messengers wear, thought Val'inar, and he smiled. Was Daemon's handiwork, to prevent him from being recognized. He put his armor on, over which he placed another tunic and fastened the new cloak around his neck, and hoisted the pack upon his back. He then unhauled and mounted the horse. With the sun rising to his right, the power of the horse beneath him, and a certain road ahead of him, Val'inar felt that perhaps things were not so dark as they seemed in his dreams. With that, he pulled his hood up over his head and whispered to his horse, which took off like a shot across the plains, golden with the sunrise. He was on his way north to the place of winds and towards the ancient home of his people, which he suddenly felt calling out to them. All right, that's the end of the chapter. That is a relatively short one. I hope you enjoyed it. Please help me out and help out the channel by hitting like, share, subscribe at the bottom. And I would love to hear your comments and thoughts upon the book, both in general, the story, the chapter, the characters, anything you want to give me feedback for, I would sincerely appreciate. But for the moment, I do hope you all have a wonderful day, get a chance to do or experience something creative, and I'll catch you on the next one.